Yesterday, before lunch, you said something similar to this. You have allowed yourself to be entangled with an object, and you believe you are this object. There are a couple of questions I have around that. At the moment you were said you, who were you speaking to? And with the word allow, and you used it this morning, which brought my hand up, allow to me implies that there's also disallow, which implies some sort of control. So would you speak to those two things?
You see, it's not absolutely true to say that we have allowed our true nature to be veiled, because from the point of view of our true nature, it only knows itself. From its point of view, which is the only real point of view, there is no veiling of itself, and therefore there is no ignorance or ignoring of itself. So the statement, we have allowed ourselves, or we have allowed ourselves to become entangled with the body and the mind, is a concession to the apparently separate self that believes and feels itself to be temporary and finite. It is to that apparent one that we believe and feel ourselves to be that the statement is made. You have allowed yourself to become entangled with thoughts and feelings. Now, the implication, as you rightly point out in the phrase, you have allowed yourself to become entangled, is the possibility that you could not allow, that you could choose not to become entangled, which then raises the question, does I, the separate self, have the free will to choose whether or not I become entangled with the body-mind? Again, the statement that you have the freedom to choose whether you are entangled with thoughts and feelings or not is a concession to the separate self we believe and feel ourselves to be. As a concession to that one, it is said, you have the choice. You have consented to limit yourself. You can choose not to. Now the reason it is said in this way to the separate self is because from the separate self's point of view, it has choice, freedom. The separate self feels that it has the freedom to choose. That is implicit in the separate self. A separate self that says, I feel that I have no free will or choice, is making a contradiction. The separate self, by definition, feels that it is choosing. And therefore, the teaching says, okay, you feel you have the freedom to choose. Choose to disentangle yourself. Make that your first choice in life, to disentangle yourself from the body and the mind and to know yourself as you truly are. When the mind returns to the heart, when the separate self is divested of its separateness and it stands revealed as the true and only self of pure awareness, then it becomes clear that there was never a separate self to begin with. And therefore the question as to whether that separate self has choice or not is mute. However, we shouldn't fall into the very common trap that a lot of contemporary Advaita teachings fall into, which is to believe and feel that I am a separate self, and to appropriate the non-dual understanding there is no free will or choice, and to mix these two beliefs together. One, the belief that I am a separate self, and two, the belief, because from the point of view of the separate self, it is a belief that I have no free will or choice. So we mix these two beliefs together, and we end up with the statement, I, the separate self, have no choice. And we end up with this nihilistic, depressing view of contemporary Advaita that we may as well just go down to the pub as opposed to coming to satsang. It's no. If we think we are a separate self, we should be honest. We, by definition, feel that we are making choices. And as that apparently separate self, the highest choice we can make is to turn our attention away from the objects that we seem to know towards the knowing with which they are known. That choice, to make that choice, affects this disentanglement of ourself from the body-mind, and we stand, our true nature stands revealed as it is.
Yeah. It seems that most of us make that choice to be entangled somewhere. I mean, for me, it was very unconscious. it appears that as you know, as we walk around this earth and are here in our separate selves, that seems like a very common choice people make. Does that?
Yes, it's a common choice, and it's a less common choice to refuse to consent to being limited by the body and the mind. But that choice is open to everybody. At any moment, the possibility to turn the light of our attention around on itself in order to know the nature of ourself, that is, the nature of the knowing with which we know our experience. It's an open door. Once we have consented to limit ourselves in time and space and become, as a result, a temporary finite entity that lives in and as the body, we are then destined to experience in a way that is consistent with that consent. And as such, we are destined to suffer. In fact, the experience of suffering is itself like a wake-up call. It is like a red flag telling us, stop. You have mistaken yourself. You have consented to limit yourself to a mind and a body. That is what the experience of suffering tells us. So once that consent has been made, we are then destined to experience all the pleasures and pains that the separate self goes through. However, that separate self always has the choice to turn around and step out of that entanglement and to question its true nature, and therefore to step out of the destiny of being a separate self. This is why Krishnamurti titled one of his books, The First and Last Freedom. When we consent to become a separate self, that is, when we consent to take on or assume the limitations that properly belong to the body and the mind, we lose our true freedom. And we are bound as a result to suffer, to enjoy and suffer as a separate self. So that is our last freedom. We give up our freedom. However, at every moment, the first possibility of all separate selves is to direct the knowing with which they know their experience back towards itself. That is the first freedom that all separate selves have. And it is a freedom that is always available to us.
You know, I don't remember making that consenting. But looking back, I'm wondering, why would I give up freedom?
You see, it's not a choice that you made in the past. It's a choice that we make moment by moment. Don't think, oh, I made this choice 40 years ago and I have been suffering the consequences ever since. This is a choice we make moment by moment.
Thank you.
And therefore, moment by moment, we can choose not to make that choice.
Thank you.